The California sun beat down on the asphalt as Corporal Nora Blackwell stepped off the transport truck, her desert-tan boots hitting the ground with practiced silence. The Naval Special Warfare Facility sprawled before her, a collection of concrete buildings and training grounds that hummed with the energy of elite operators pushing their limits. She adjusted the strap of her canvas pack, her eyes scanning the compound with the same methodical precision she applied to everything in her life. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've seen incredible acts of courage in your own community. The guard at the checkpoint barely glanced at her identification before waving her through. She was used to that. At 5'6", with a frame that suggested endurance rather than brute strength, she rarely commanded immediate attention. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform was crisp despite the long journey from Camp Pendleton. 3 small ribbons decorated her chest, deliberately minimal given what she actually carried in her service record. The administrative building stood at the center of the compound, its windows reflecting the afternoon glare. Nora pushed through the double doors into the blessed relief of air conditioning. A petty officer sat behind the front desk, his eyes lifting from his computer screen with the kind of bored efficiency that came from processing countless arrivals. "I need to check in for the Joint Operations Assessment," she said, her voice steady and professional. The petty officer took her orders, scanning them with minimal interest. "You the Marine liaison they told us about?" "Yes, petty officer." He handed back her paperwork, jerking his thumb toward a hallway to the right. "Third door down. Master Chief Donovan handles all the assessment check-ins. You'll get your bunk assignment and schedule from him." "Thank you," she replied, taking her documents and moving down the corridor. Master Chief Donovan was exactly what she expected, a weathered career SEAL with gray threading through his close-cropped hair and eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by anything. He looked up from his desk as she entered, his gaze taking her in with swift assessment. "Corporal Blackwell," she said, handing over her orders. He studied the paperwork, then glanced at her again. "Marine Corps, sending us a liaison for the assessment program. First time they've sent someone for this particular cycle. What's her MOS?" 0313, she said simply. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Scout Sniper. Interesting. How much trigger time you got?" "Enough to qualify, Master Chief." He grunted, making a note on his computer. "Well, you'll be bunking in the temporary quarters building. Chow Hall's open from 0530 to 1900. Your assessment schedule starts tomorrow at 0600. You'll be participating in various training exercises alongside our SEAL candidates and established teams. The purpose is evaluation of joint operational capabilities." "Understood, Master Chief." "One more thing," he said, his tone shifting to something more cautious. "The teams here, they're used to operating at a certain level. There's going to be some attitudes. Some of these guys have never worked with a female Marine in a combat specialty." "I'm familiar with attitudes, Master Chief," Nora said quietly. "I'm sure you are," he replied, handing back her orders along with a building map and room key. "Just keep your head down, do your job, and don't let the noise get to you." Dismissed. She found her quarters easily enough, a small room with a rack, a locker, and a desk. Spartan but functional. She unpacked methodically, hanging her uniforms and organizing her gear with the same precision that governed everything she did. When she finished, she sat on the edge of the rack and allowed herself a moment of stillness. This assignment was supposed to be straightforward. 3 weeks of joint training assessments, demonstrating Marine Corps capabilities, building relationships between branches. But she knew what Master Chief Donovan had really been telling her. She was walking into a world where her presence would be questioned, where every action would be scrutinized, where proving herself would be a constant demand. She had dealt with it before. 3 deployments, 2 to Helmand Province and 1 to Syria. Each time, the same skepticism. Each time, the same need to demonstrate that her skills were as sharp as anyone's. But she had learned something valuable over those years. Actions mattered more than words, and patience was its own form of strength. The rifle range, she knew, would be her first real test. It always was. The morning air still held a hint of coolness when Nora made her way to the training center at 0545. She had risen at 0430, a habit ingrained from years of pre-dawn operations. The compound was already alive with activity, groups of SEALs running in formation, the distant crack of gunfire from the ranges, the rhythmic cadence of physical training echoing across the grounds. The training center was a sprawling facility that housed everything from classroom spaces to equipment storage. She pushed through the main entrance and followed the signs to room 117, where the morning briefing was scheduled. The room was already half full when she arrived, maybe 20 operators scattered across the chairs, most wearing the tan and green of SEAL teams, a few in standard Navy working uniforms. Conversations died as she entered. Eyes tracked her movement to an empty seat near the back. She could feel the weight of their assessment, the silent questions. She kept her face neutral, her movements unhurried, and took her seat without acknowledging the attention. A lieutenant commander entered, calling the room to attention. Everyone stood, then settled back down as he waved them off. The briefing covered the day's schedule: physical training, small unit tactics, close quarters combat drills, and range time in the afternoon. Standard assessment protocol designed to evaluate both individual capabilities and team integration. When the briefing ended, the operators filed out in clusters, their conversations resuming. Nora gathered her notebook and followed, maintaining a respectful distance from the established groups. She knew better than to force integration. Trust was earned, not demanded. The physical training was brutal but familiar. 2 hours of running, calisthenics, and obstacle courses designed to push even elite operators to their limits. She kept pace, her smaller frame compensating with efficiency what it lacked in raw power. A few of the SEALs glanced her way during the exercises, their expressions ranging from surprise to grudging acknowledgement. Most ignored her entirely. It was during the break between morning sessions that she first encountered Chief Petty Officer Brett Carlson. He was holding court near the equipment shed, surrounded by half a dozen younger operators who hung on his every word. Tall and broad-shouldered with the kind of confidence that bordered on arrogance, he had the look of someone who had never questioned his own superiority. His voice carried across the training yard. "So they're sending us Marines now," he said, loud enough to ensure she heard. "Next thing you know, they'll have the Coast Guard running point on direct action missions." Laughter rippled through his audience. Nora continued walking toward the water station, her face expressionless. "Hey, Marine," Carlson called out. "You lost? Personnel office is back that way if you need to file some paperwork." She filled her water bottle, took a long drink, then turned to face him. Her voice was level, professional. "Just here for the joint assessment, Chief." "Joint assessment," he repeated, grinning at his companions. "That's what they're calling it now. Used to be we just trained operators. Now we're running a diversity program." More laughter. One of the younger SEALs looked uncomfortable, but none of them challenged Carlson's words. "I'm sure you'll find the assessment meets your standards, Chief," Nora said quietly, then turned and walked away. She could hear him behind her, his voice dripping with mock courtesy. "Oh, I'm sure it will, Corporal. I'm sure it will." The morning's tactical exercises were more of the same. Carlson made a point of positioning himself near her during the drills, offering loud commentary on proper technique and suggesting she might want to take notes. When they broke into fire teams for building clearance practice, she was the last one picked, relegated to rear security while the SEALs took point positions. She accepted it all without protest. She had learned long ago that arguing only fed the narrative they wanted. Better to stay silent, observe, and wait for the moment when actions could speak louder than any defense. Lunch was a quick affair in the Chow Hall, where she ate alone at a corner table. Gunnery Sergeant Luis Torres, the senior Marine liaison she had been told about, finally appeared and took a seat across from her. "Settling in okay?" he asked, his weathered face sympathetic. "Fine, Ganni." He studied her for a moment. "Carlson giving you trouble already?" "Nothing I haven't dealt with before." Torres nodded slowly. He's got a reputation. Good operator, but he's got some blind spots about who belongs in the teams. Just keep doing what you're doing. The assessment observers see everything, even when it doesn't feel like it. Understood, Gunny. What's your schedule this afternoon? Range time at 1300 hours. His expression shifted, something that might have been satisfaction crossing his features. Good. That should be interesting. The afternoon sun was unforgiving as the group assembled at the rifle range. 25 lanes stretched out before them, each with targets set at various distances. A senior chief was running the session, explaining the qualification standards and competition format. Each operator would engage targets from 100 to 600 meters, with points awarded for accuracy and speed. Nora collected her assigned rifle, a standard M4 carbine, and moved to her designated lane. She checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, her hands moving through the inspection routine without conscious thought. Around her, the SEALs were doing the same, their conversations a low buzz of technical discussion and good-natured trash talk. Carlson appeared at the lane next to hers, his presence clearly intentional. He glanced at her rifle, then at her, his smile predatory. "You know how to use one of those, Corporal?" Carlson asked, nodding toward her rifle. "Or did they just give you a participation trophy back at Pendleton?" Several SEALs within earshot chuckled. Nora kept her eyes on her weapon, finishing her inspection before looking up at him. "I'm familiar with the platform, Chief." "Familiar?" he repeated, savoring the word. "Well, I'm familiar with a lot of things. Doesn't mean I'm any good at them." He raised his voice slightly, addressing the nearby operators. "Anyone want to place bets on how many rounds our Marine liaison puts on target?" "I'll take that action," someone called back. "I say she gets maybe 40% at 100 meters. "Generous," another voice chimed in. "I'm thinking 30. The senior chief running the range called for attention, silencing the chatter. "All right, listen up. This is a standard qualification course with competitive scoring. You'll engage targets at 100, 200, 400, and 600 meters. 5 rounds per distance, 20 rounds total. Highest score wins bragging rights and gets out of tomorrow's ODARC 30 conditioning run." Questions? No one spoke. "Outstanding. First relay. Take your positions." Nora was in the second relay. She stood behind her lane, watching as the first group of shooters moved into position. The range commands echoed across the facility. "Low to make ready. Shooters ready. Stand by." The sharp crack of gunfire split the air as the first relay engaged their targets. She watched with professional interest, noting the patterns of fire, the adjustments between distances, the occasional curse when a shot went wide. These were skilled operators, their accuracy well above standard infantry levels. Most were putting tight groups on target, their years of training evident in every controlled breath and smooth trigger press. The first relay completed their course and cleared their weapons. The senior chief called out scores, most ranging from 85 to 95%. Solid performance by any measure. Second relay, take your positions. Nora moved to the firing line, the rifle comfortable in her hands despite being a different model than she usually preferred. She settled into a stable shooting position, her body finding the familiar angles without conscious thought. To her right, Carlson made a show of adjusting his stance, his movements exaggerated for the benefit of his audience. The range commands began again. "Load and make ready." She inserted a magazine, chambered a round, and flipped the safety on. Her breathing had already slowed, her heart rate steady despite the attention focused on her. This was familiar territory. This was where the noise of the world faded away and only the rifle, the target, and the space between them mattered. Shooters ready. She pressed the stock firmly into her shoulder, her cheek finding the proper weld against the receiver. Her support hand gripped the handguard with just enough tension to stabilize without inducing tremor. Her trigger finger rested along the frame, waiting. "Stand by." The command to fire came in the pause between heartbeats. She flipped the safety off and acquired her first target at 100 meters. The fundamentals were automatic now, drilled into muscle memory through thousands of repetitions. Sight alignment, sight picture, breath control. Trigger press. The rifle barked, and the target registered a hit. Center mass. She worked through the remaining 4 rounds at that distance with mechanical precision, each shot finding its mark before the target could reset. Around her, other rifles cracked in a regular rhythm as operators engaged their own targets. 200 meters, the senior chief called out. She adjusted her position slightly, compensating for the increased distance. The wind was negligible today, maybe 3 miles per hour from the west. Not enough to require significant holdover. She found her target and began her engagement sequence. 5 more rounds. 5 more hits. The rifle was starting to heat up, the barrel temperature rising with each shot. She could feel it through the handguard, a warm reminder of the weapon's living presence in her hands. 400 meters. Now the range was starting to demand more. At this distance, even small errors in fundamentals would be magnified. She slowed her breathing further, letting her body settle into complete stillness between shots. The target seemed to float in her sight picture, solid and clear despite the distance. The first round impacted slightly right of center. Wind shift. She adjusted her hold and sent the second round exactly where she wanted it. The remaining 3 followed with the same precision, each one a confirmation of judgment and execution combined. 600 meters. This was the edge of effective range for a standard carbine with iron sights. Most operators would be happy with 3 out of 5 hits at this distance. Nora knew she needed better than that. Not to win, she had no illusions about that, but to demonstrate that she belonged here. She took extra time on her first shot, letting her body read the conditions, feeling for any variable she might have missed. The trigger broke cleanly, and the distant target registered a hit. She worked through the remaining 4 rounds with the same deliberate care, each one a conversation between shooter and rifle, between intent and outcome. Ceasefire. Unload and show clear. She dropped the magazine, locked the bolt back, and verified the chamber was empty. The senior chief moved down the line, checking each weapon before allowing the shooters to step back from the firing line. The scoring took a few minutes as spotters confirmed the hits on each target. Carlson had shot well, his score announced at 92%. Several other SEALs clustered in the high 80s. Professional grade shooting by any standard. Lane 14, the senior chief called out. That was Nora's lane. 100 meters, 5 for 5. 200 meters, 5 for 5. 400 meters, 5 for 5. 600 meters, 5 for 5. Perfect score, 20 for 20. The silence that followed the announcement stretched for several seconds. Nora could feel the weight of eyes shifting toward her, reassessing. She kept her expression neutral, her rifle still pointed downrange as she waited for the command to clear the line. Carlson was the first to speak, his voice carrying an edge of disbelief. Run that again, Senior Chief. Lane 14. The senior chief consulted his scorecard, his weathered face showing no particular emotion. Lane 14, Corporal Blackwell. Perfect score. 20 rounds, 20 hits, all center mass, or better. Must be a scoring error, Carlson said, moving toward the spotting table. Let me see the targets. The senior chief stepped aside, allowing Carlson to examine the spotted targets. Nora watched from her lane as he studied each one, his jaw tightening with each confirmation. The other SEALs gathered around, their conversations dropping to murmurs. Lieutenant Marcus Granger, the SEAL team leader who had been observing the qualifications, approached the group. He was lean and compact, his movements efficient, his eyes missing nothing. He examined the targets himself, then looked toward Nora's lane. Corporal Blackwell, he called out, front and center. She secured her rifle and moved to where the group had gathered. Every face was turned toward her now, expressions ranging from surprise to skepticism to something that might have been grudging respect. That's solid shooting, Granger said simply. Where did you qualify as a scout sniper? Camp Lejeune, sir. Class 0313. Granger nodded slowly. And you've been in the fleet how long? 6 years, sir. 3 deployments. His eyes narrowed slightly, and she could see him calculating, putting pieces together. What units? 1st Battalion, 7th Marines for my first 2 deployments. Then I was attached to a Special Operations Task Force for my 3rd, she said, keeping her tone matter-of-fact. Where were those deployments? Helmand Province twice. Northern Syria once. Something shifted in Granger's expression, a flicker of recognition or perhaps curiosity. He studied her for another moment, then nodded. Well, you've earned your spot out of tomorrow's PT session. Carry on. The group began to disperse, but Nora could hear the conversations continuing in lower tones. Carlson remained by the spotting table, his arms crossed, his face set in hard lines. He caught her eye as she turned to leave. Lucky day, Marine, he said. Let's see if you can repeat that performance when it actually matters. She met his gaze steadily. I look forward to the opportunity, Chief. The rest of the afternoon passed with a different energy. The overt mockery had subsided, replaced by a more watchful silence. During the close-quarters combat drills, she noticed operators actually paying attention to her movements, evaluating rather than dismissing. When they broke into fire teams for building clearance exercises, she was no longer relegated to rear security. Petty Officer Kyle Hendricks, one of Carlson's regular companions, ended up partnered with her for a 2-man room clearance drill. He was perhaps 25, built like a college linebacker, with the kind of eager aggression that came from wanting to prove himself among more experienced operators. You actually shoot like that regularly? He asked as they waited for their turn in the kill house. When I need to, she replied. That's not normal, you know, even for scout snipers. I've worked with plenty of Marine snipers. Most of them are good, but perfect scores at 600 meters with a carbine? That's different. I've had good training. He studied her for a moment, something shifting in his expression. Look, Carlson's my chief, and I respect him. But that shooting back there, that was legitimate. Just wanted you to know not everyone's buying into the dismissive attitude. Appreciated, she said simply. Their turn came, and they moved through the kill house with professional efficiency. Hendricks took point, his movement confident but not reckless. Nora covered angles and cleared corners with the same precision she had demonstrated on the range. When they finished, the instructor running the drill nodded approval. Clean run. Good communication, good coverage. Well done. As the training day wound down, Nora made her way back to her quarters. The California evening had turned cool, the base settling into the quieter rhythm of off-duty hours. She was passing the operations building when Gunnery Sergeant Torres fell in a step beside her. Heard about your range performance, he said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Perfect score tends to get people's attention. It was a basic qualification course, Gunny. Nothing special. Torres snorted. Don't sell it short, Corporal. Half those SEALs have been shooting professionally for a decade, and they couldn't match that. You made a statement today, whether you intended to or not. Statements don't mean much if I can't back them up consistently. Fair point, he acknowledged. But you got them wondering now. That's the first step. Carlson especially. I saw his face when they announced your score. That's a man who just realized his assumptions might be wrong. They walked in silence for a moment before Torres spoke again. You know, when I heard they were sending a female Marine for this assessment, I had my doubts. Not about capability, understand, but about whether it was worth the hassle you'd have to endure. Now I'm thinking maybe Command knew exactly what they were doing. What do you mean, Gunny? These SEAL teams, they're getting ready to integrate women into their ranks. It's coming whether they like it or not. Having someone like you here, demonstrating that the standards can be met, that might smooth some rough edges before the official integration begins. I'm just here to complete my assessment, Gunny. Sure you are, Torres said with a knowing smile. But sometimes we end up doing more than we planned. Just keep doing what you're doing. And Corporal, watch your back. Carlson's not the type to let a bruised ego heal quietly. He'll be looking for ways to prove you're not as good as that range score suggests. Understood, Gunny. Torres peeled off toward the senior enlisted quarters, leaving Nora to continue alone. She reached her room and secured the door behind her, finally allowing herself to release the tension she had been carrying all day. The rifle range had gone better than expected, but Torres was right. She had made herself visible now, and visibility came with complications. The next morning brought a shift in the assessment schedule. Instead of the usual rotation of physical training and technical drills, the entire group was assembled in a briefing room where Commander Vincent Reyes waited. He was a compact man in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that suggested decades of operational experience. His uniform displayed the trident of a SEAL, along with ribbons that spoke of extensive combat deployments. "Good morning," he said as the room settled. "Today marks a transition in your assessment cycle. For the next 72 hours, you'll be participating in a force-and-force exercise designed to evaluate tactical decision-making under pressure. The scenario involves a hostage rescue operation in a simulated urban environment. You'll be divided into two elements: assault teams and opposition force." He clicked a remote, and a map appeared on the screen behind him. The training area was a mock village constructed on the northern edge of the base, complete with multi-story buildings, narrow streets, and realistic urban terrain. The opposition force will be playing the role of hostile combatants, holding 3 high-value targets in an unknown location within the village. The assault teams will have 48 hours to locate and extract the hostages. Both sides will be using simunition rounds, so expect it to hurt if you get hit. Medical personnel will be on standby, and safety officers will be monitoring throughout. Carlson raised his hand. "How are the teams being divided, Commander?" "Random draw," Reyes replied. "We want to see how you adapt to working with unfamiliar team compositions." He gestured to a box on the table beside him. "Red chips are assault force. Blue chips are opposition force. Line up a draw." The operators filed past the box, each drawing a chip. Nora drew red. She glanced around and saw that she would be on the assault force along with Granger, Hendricks, and about 15 other SEALs. Carlson, she noted with a mix of relief and disappointment, had drawn blue. He would be part of the opposition force. "Assault teams, you have 2 hours to organize, plan, and stage your equipment," Reyes continued. "Opposition force, you have the same time to establish your defensive positions and hide the hostages. Intelligence packets are available at the operations desk. Any questions?" No one spoke. "Outstanding. Safety brief will be conducted at 1100 hours. Exercise begins at 1200. Dismissed." The assault force gathered in a side room where Granger immediately took charge. He spread the intelligence packet across a table, and the team clustered around. The packet contained aerial photos of the village, known entry points, and general intel about the opposition force numbers and capabilities. "All right, listen up," Granger said. "We got a 16-person assault element going against approximately 20 opposition fighters, defending unknown positions with 3 hostages somewhere in this village. The opposition has had time to prepare, which means they'll have overlapping fields of fire and likely some nasty surprises waiting for us." A senior petty officer named Richardson spoke up. "Standard approach would be multiple entry points, simultaneous breach, overwhelm their ability to respond effectively." "Agreed," Granger said. "But we need good reconnaissance first. We can't just charge in blind." He looked around the group, his eyes settling on Nora. "Corporal Blackwell, your scout sniper qualified. What's your assessment of our reconnaissance options?" All eyes turned to her. She studied the aerial photos, noting the sight lines and elevation positions around the village. "There are 3 buildings on the perimeter with height advantage," she said, pointing to the locations. "If we can get observers into position on these rooftops before the exercise starts, we can map their defensive positions and identify likely hostage locations based on their force distribution." "Time intensive," Richardson observed. "We only have 2 hours to prep. Better to spend the time on good intel than to rush in and take casualties," Nora replied. "Speed is useless if we're moving in the wrong direction." Granger nodded slowly. "She's right. Richardson, take 3 people and handle equipment and ammunition distribution. Hendricks, you and 2 others work on contingency planning for various hostage locations. Blackwell, you're with me. We're going to do a physical reconnaissance of the area before the exercise starts." Within 30 minutes, Nora found herself moving through the training village alongside Granger and a petty officer named Chun. The village was eerily quiet, the buildings empty and waiting. They moved carefully, noting entry points, potential sniper positions, and natural choke points where an assault force could be channeled into kill zones. Granger moved with the efficiency of extensive experience, his observations sharp and tactical. Chen was younger but competent, asking good questions and taking detailed notes. They treated Nora as an equal member of the reconnaissance element, a marked difference from the previous day's dynamics. As they studied a two-story building that offered commanding views of the village center, Granger paused and looked at Nora directly. "I looked into your service record last night," he said quietly. "The unclassified portions, anyway. 3 deployments, multiple commendations, expert rifle and pistol qualifications every year. But there are some gaps in the timeline. Periods where your unit assignment isn't listed. Some assignments aren't listed for operational security reasons." "Sir," she replied carefully. He studied her for a moment longer. "Fair enough. But I'm starting to think there's more to your story than a basic Marine liaison assignment. Am I right?" "I'm here to complete my assessment, sir. Same as everyone else." Granger smiled slightly. "You're diplomatic. I'll give you that. All right, keep your secret for now. But I'm a patient man, and I'm good at putting pieces together." He turned back to the village layout. "What's your read on their most likely defensive setup?" She considered the terrain, thinking through the tactical problem from the opposition's perspective. "If I were defending, I'd put my primary force here, in this cluster of buildings around the central square. Natural kill zone with multiple firing positions. I'd position observers on the perimeter to give early warning, and I'd keep a quick reaction force mobile to respond to any breach. The hostages would be in the most defensible position, probably this reinforced structure on the east side. Why there? Single entry point, thick walls, elevated position allowing the defenders to control the only approach. If we want the hostages, we have to come through a relatively narrow avenue of attack." Chen nodded. "That makes sense. Which means we need to either find an alternative approach or create a significant diversion to split their attention." "Both," Norris said. "A diversion to fix their main force in place, and a small element moving through this drainage system to approach the hostage location from an unexpected angle." Granger studied the drainage system on the map, tracing the route with his finger. "It's tight. Maybe 2 people could move through there without making too much noise. But if they get compromised, there's no easy extraction." "That's why it works," Norris said. "They won't expect anyone to take that risk. All their attention will be focused on the obvious approaches." He looked at her with renewed assessment. "You volunteering for that infiltration route?" "If you think it's the best use of my skills, sir." Chen glanced between them. She need a partner. Someone small enough to fit through those passages and skilled enough to fight their way out if things go sideways. "I'll go with her," Hendricks said from behind them. They turned to find him standing in the doorway, having apparently caught the last part of their conversation. "I'm not as big as Richardson, and I can move quiet when I need to." Granger considered this for a moment. "All right, you 2 will be our infiltration element. But understand, if this goes wrong, the main assault force won't be able to support you quickly. You'll be on your own until we can fight through to your position." "Understood, sir," Nora and Hendricks said in unison. The next hour was spent refining the plan. The main assault force would stage a noisy, aggressive push from the western approach, drawing the opposition's attention and forcing them to commit their quick reaction force. Meanwhile, Nora and Hendricks would use the drainage system to approach the suspected hostage location from the east, hopefully reaching the building while the defenders were focused elsewhere. At 1100 hours, the entire group assembled for the safety brief. The rules were straightforward. Simunition rounds only, headshots didn't count as kills to prevent face injuries, and anyone hit in center mass or limbs was considered wounded and had to withdraw from the immediate area. 3 strikes, and you were completely out of the exercise. Commander Reyes observed the briefing with his characteristic intensity. "Remember," he said as they concluded, "this exercise is about tactical decision-making and adaptation under pressure. We're not looking for Hollywood heroics. We want to see sound judgment, good communication, and effective teamwork. The opposition force has been instructed to make this realistic. Expect them to fight smart and hard." At 1200 hours, the exercise began. The assault force moved into their staging positions on the western edge of the village. Nora and Hendricks split off from the main element, circling south to reach the drainage entrance. The system was exactly as tight as the reconnaissance had suggested, a concrete tunnel barely 3 feet in diameter that forced them to move in a low crouch. Hendricks took point with Nora covering their rear. Their progress was slow and deliberate, every movement calculated to minimize noise. The tunnel amplified even the smallest sounds, making their breathing seem unnaturally loud in the confined space. After 20 minutes of careful movement, they reached a junction where the drainage system split. Hendricks paused, consulting the small map he had marked up during their planning. "Left tunnel should bring us out about 50 meters from the target building," he whispered. They took the left passage and continued forward. Above them, they could hear the muffled sounds of the main assault beginning. Gunfire crackled in short bursts, along with shouted commands and the distinctive snap of simunition rounds impacting concrete and metal. "They're engaged," Hendricks said quietly. "That's our cue." They emerged from the drainage tunnel into a narrow alley behind a cluster of buildings. Nora took a knee and scanned their surroundings while Hendricks cleared their exit. No immediate threats visible, but the sounds of combat were intensifying from the western side of the village. "Target building is 2 blocks north," Nora said. "We move fast and quiet. Stay in the shadows and use the buildings for cover." They moved through the village like ghosts, exploiting every piece of concealment, freezing when opposition fighters rushed past their position toward the sound of the main assault. The opposition force was exactly where Nora had predicted, concentrating their strength against the obvious threat. The target building loomed before them, a 2-story structure with reinforced walls and a single entrance. 2 opposition fighters stood guard at the door, their attention focused toward the ongoing firefight. Hendricks looked at Nora and made a series of hand signals. "You take left, I take right, simultaneous engagement on your mark." She nodded and shifted her position to get a clear line of fire. The range was maybe 30 meters, close enough for reliable shots, even with the less accurate simunition rounds. She settled her breathing, found her target in her sights, and raised 3 fingers where Hendricks could see them. 3, 2, 1. Both rifles fired in the same instant. Both guards dropped, marked by the paint rounds that signified kills. Nora and Hendricks were already moving, sprinting across the open space to the building entrance. They stacked on either side of the door, weapons ready. Hendricks tested the handle. Locked. He pulled a small pry bar from his kit and worked into the door frame. The lock gave way with a sharp crack that seemed impossibly loud despite the ongoing battle sounds from across the village. They flowed through the doorway into a dim interior. The ground floor was empty, but they could hear movement on the second level. A stairway led upward, narrow and easily defendable. Nora moved to the base of the stairs and listened. At least 2 people moving around up there, possibly more. Hendricks positioned himself to cover the stairway. "We could wait for the main force to reach us," he suggested quietly. "By then the opposition will realize their rear is compromised and shift defenders here," Nora replied. "We need to move now while they're still committed forward." He nodded, accepting her judgment. "All right, I'll go first, you cover." "Actually," Nora said, her voice taking on a different quality, something harder and more certain, "I should take point on this one. Trust me." Hendricks looked at her, seeing something in her expression that made him pause. Then he nodded and shifted position to provide covering fire. Nora moved up the stairs with a speed that seemed reckless, but was actually precisely calculated. She had done this before, many times, in places where the rounds were real and the consequences permanent. Her weapon tracked smoothly as she cleared each angle, her body moving with economy of motion that came from extensive experience. She reached the top of the stairs and immediately engaged 2 opposition fighters who were watching the windows overlooking the main battle. Both went down before they could react. A third fighter spun from a doorway and raised his weapon, but Nora's shot caught him center mass before he could fire. Hendricks came up the stairs behind her, his eyes wide with something between shock and admiration. "That was," he started, then stopped, searching for words. That was professional-level close-quarters work. Nora was already moving toward the room where she suspected the hostages would be held. Keep moving. We're not done yet. The second-floor corridor stretched before them, 3 doors on each side. The sound of gunfire from the main battle had intensified, suggesting the assault force was pushing deeper into the village. That meant time was running short before the opposition realized their rear guard had been compromised. She approached the first door and tested the handle. Unlocked. She pushed it open smoothly, weapon up and ready. Empty room, nothing but training furniture and shadows. She cleared it in seconds and moved to the next. The second door was locked. She stepped back and let Hendricks work his pry bar again. The lock gave way and they flowed into the room together, covering different angles. Also empty. That left 4 more rooms to clear. The third door opened to reveal a fighter positioned to ambush anyone entering. But Nora had anticipated the tactic, using the door itself as a shield and firing around it before fully committing to entry. The opposition fighter took a paint round to the shoulder and raised his hands, acknowledging the hit. "You're good," he muttered as they moved past him. "Really good." They cleared the 4th and 5th rooms without contact. That left 1 door at the end of the hallway. Unlike the others, this one had been reinforced with additional metal plating. Definitely the hostage location. Nora and Hendricks stacked on either side of the door. "This one's going to be defended," she said quietly. Multiple shooters, probably with interlocking fields of fire covering the entrance. "Breach and clear?" Hendricks asked. "Too predictable. They'll cut us down the moment we come through." She studied the hallway, then looked up at the ceiling. "These buildings have crawl spaces above the second floor. If we can get up there, we might be able to come in from above." Hendricks followed her gaze. "That's creative and completely insane." "Sometimes those are the same thing," she replied with a ghost of a smile. They found access to the crawl space through a maintenance hatch in one of the cleared rooms. The space above was tight and filled with exposed beams and insulation, but it was navigable. They moved carefully, following the layout until they were positioned above the target room. Through gaps in the ceiling panels, they could see 3 opposition fighters positioned defensively, their weapons trained on the door. Between them, 3 individuals wearing orange vests sat with their hands zip-tied behind their backs. The hostages. Nora and Hendricks made eye contact, communicating the plan through hand signals. They would drop through the ceiling simultaneously, using surprise and speed to neutralize the defenders before they could respond effectively. On 3, Nora signaled. 1, 2, 3. They kicked through the ceiling panels and dropped into the room, landing in crouches with weapons already tracking targets. Nora's first shot hit the defender closest to the hostages. Her second caught the fighter near the window. Hendricks engaged the third, his round marking a solid hit center mass. The entire engagement lasted maybe 4 seconds. The 3 opposition fighters raised their hands, acknowledging their elimination. One of them, a petty officer Nora didn't recognize, was shaking his head in disbelief. "How did you even know we were set up that way?" he asked. "Because it's what I would have done," Nora replied, already moving to check the hostages. The individuals in orange vests were role players, instructors playing the part of rescued civilians. One of them, a grizzled Master Chief, grinned as Hendricks cut their zip ties. "Well executed," he said. "Best infiltration and rescue I've seen in these exercises in about 5 years." Hendricks keyed his radio. "Main assault element. This is infiltration team. We have secured the hostages. Building is clear. Recommend you consolidate position and prepare for extraction." Granger's voice came back, slightly breathless from ongoing combat. "Copy that. Outstanding work. Hold position. We're fighting our way to you now." The next 10 minutes were tense as they waited for the main assault force to reach their location. Nora positioned herself at a window overlooking the approaches, providing overwatch while Hendricks secured the hostages in the safest part of the room. She could see opposition fighters attempting to reposition, but they were caught between the advancing assault force and the need to retake the hostage building. She engaged targets of opportunity, her shots forcing the opposition to take cover and disrupting their attempts to organize a coherent response. Each shot was deliberate, placed exactly where it needed to be to maximum effect, without exposing her position too much. Finally, Granger and the main assault force reached the building. They had taken casualties, several operators marked out with multiple paint hits, but they had fought through successfully. Granger came up the stairs and found Nora and Hendricks with the secured hostages. His face was flushed from exertion, but his eyes were sharp with assessment. "Give me the short version," he said. "Infiltrated through drainage system as planned," Corporal Blackwell replied. "Eliminated perimeter guards, cleared ground floor and the second floor. Found hostages in reinforced room. Access through ceiling crawl space to avoid defensive positions. 3 opposition fighters neutralized. Hostages secured without casualties." Granger looked at the hole in the ceiling, then at the opposition fighters who had been defending the room. They all nodded confirmation of her account. He turned back to Nora with an expression that mixed respect with growing curiosity. "Through the ceiling," he repeated. "That's not standard tactics manual procedure. Standard procedures get people killed when the opposition knows them too," Nora said simply. Before Granger could respond, Commander Reyes's voice came over the radio calling for all personnel to assemble in the village center for debrief. The exercise was officially over. The assault force had achieved their objective with acceptable casualties and in under 2 hours of engagement time. They made their way down to the village center where both assault and opposition forces were gathering. Carlson was there, his uniform marked with several paint hits indicating he had been in the thick of the fighting. His face darkened when he saw Nora and Hendricks emerging with the hostages. Commander Reyes stood on a small platform addressing the assembled group. "Solid performance all around," he said. "The opposition force made the assault element work for every meter of ground, and the assault force adapted well to a fluid tactical situation. But I want to specifically highlight the infiltration team. Corporal Blackwell and Petty Officer Hendricks executed a textbook depenetration mission that directly led to mission success with minimal casualties." The debrief lasted another hour as Reyes broke down the tactical decisions made by both sides, highlighting what worked and what could be improved. Carlson sat with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, as the commander repeatedly referenced the infiltration team's success. When Reyes finally dismissed them, the group dispersed toward the chow hall, the adrenaline of the exercise giving way to exhaustion and hunger. Nora was cleaning her rifle in the armory when Granger found her. He watched her work for a moment, noting the practiced efficiency of her movements as she broke down the weapon and inspected each component. "We need to talk," he said quietly. She continued working, not looking up. "About what, sir?" "About who you really are. I did some more digging after the exercise. Made some calls to people I know in the Marine Corps intelligence community. Your service record has more redactions than a classified operation report." She set down the rifle's bolt carrier group and met his eyes. "Some assignments require operational security, sir. You know that." "I do," he agreed. "But I also know the difference between standard OPSEC and something more significant. You're not just a regular scout sniper, are you?" "I'm a Marine corporal completing a joint assessment," she replied carefully. Granger pulled up a chair and sat down, his voice dropping even lower. "Let me tell you what I think. I think you've been attached to special operations units. I think you've done work that doesn't make it into official records. And I think that shooting performance and those close quarters tactics aren't just the result of standard Marine training." "Am I getting warm?" Nora was silent for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. "Some questions are better left unasked, Lieutenant. For everyone's benefit." He studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But understand something, Corporal. Whatever your background is, it's clear you're operating at a level above what we typically see. That's going to attract more attention, especially from people like Carlson who don't like having their assumptions challenged." "I can handle attention, sir." "I'm sure you can," Granger said, standing. "But handling it and avoiding unnecessary conflict are different things. Carlson's got a reputation for pushing back when he feels threatened. And right now, you're a direct threat to his worldview about who belongs in special operations." He left before she could respond. Nora finished cleaning her rifle, her mind working through the implications. She had known this assignment would be challenging, but she hadn't anticipated how quickly her performance would raise questions about her background. The problem with being good at what she did was that it made people curious about where she had learned those skills. The next morning brought a new challenge. The assessment schedule called for a long-range shooting exercise at a facility 30 miles north of the base. The group loaded into transport vehicles before dawn, the mood subdued after the previous day's intensive exercise. Nora found herself in a vehicle with Hendricks, Richardson, and 3 other SEALs who seemed content to ignore her presence. The range facility was impressive, with targets set at distances from 500 to 1,500 meters. A weapons tech was waiting with an array of precision rifles, from standard M110 semi-automatic systems to bolt-action platforms designed for extreme range engagement. Commander Reyes addressed the group as they assembled near the firing line. Today's exercise focuses on precision engagement at extended ranges. Each of you will engage targets at 500, 800, 1,000, and 1,500 meters. You'll be evaluated on accuracy, consistency, and ability to adjust for environmental factors. Wind is running about 8 miles per hour from the southwest. Temperature is 62 degrees, and we're at about 300 feet elevation. Carlson raised his hand. Will we be using spotters, Commander? Negative, Reyes replied. This is an individual assessment of your ability to read conditions and make adjustments independently. You'll each get 2 sighting shots, then 5 rounds for record at each distance. The first few shooters cycled through, their performance ranging from adequate to impressive. Richardson put consistent hits on target out to 1,000 meters, but struggled at 1,500. Another SEAL named Kowalski shot well at medium ranges, but fell apart at the longer distances when wind became a more significant factor. When Carlson's turn came, he selected an M110 and moved to the firing line with obvious confidence. His performance was solid, putting most of his rounds on target through 1,000 meters. At 1,500, he managed 3 hits out of 5, a respectable showing that drew nods of approval from the observers. Not bad, Richardson commented. That's about standard for this range. Carlson finished his course of fire and cleared his weapon, his expression satisfied. He glanced toward where Nora waited with the remaining shooters. Let's see how the Marine does at real distance, he said, loud enough to carry. Carbine qualification at 600 is one thing. Precision work at 1,500 is something else entirely. Nora's name was called. She moved to the weapon selection area and studied the available rifles. The tech watched her with professional interest as she examined each platform, checking actions and sight systems. She finally selected a bolt-action rifle chambered in 300 Win Mag, a proven long-range system. Good choice, the tech said quietly. That particular rifle has been zeroed recently and shoots consistent groups. She moved to the firing line and assumed a prone position. The 500-meter target seemed almost insultingly close, well within the range where she could practically point shoot with this level of equipment. She took her 2 sighting shots, noted her impacts, and made a minor adjustment to her scope. The 5 rounds for record went downrange in smooth succession. 5 hits, all within the 10 ring. She moved through 800 meters with the same precision, then 1,000. Each distance required reading the wind, calculating the bullet drop, and executing perfect trigger control. The fundamentals were the same regardless of range, just more demanding as distance increased. At 1,500 meters, the target was a small silhouette that wavered in the mirage created by temperature differences. This was where shooting became as much art as science, where experience and instinct combined with technical skill. The wind at this range was doing complex things, swirling and gusting in ways that required not just calculation but feel. She took her time with the sighting shots, watching how the wind pushed the bullet, noting the pattern. Then she made her adjustments and settled into her shooting rhythm. The rifle barked 5 times, each shot separated by several seconds as she read conditions and confirmed her hold. The spotter called out her impacts. 5 for 5, all within the 10 ring. Excellent shooting. A murmur ran through the observers. 1,500-meter shooting with that level of consistency was rare even among experienced snipers. Carlson's face had gone rigid, his earlier satisfaction replaced by something darker. Granger was standing near Commander Reyes, and Nora could see them speaking quietly, though she couldn't hear the conversation. Reyes was watching her with an intensity that suggested his curiosity was fully aroused. The group returned to base in the late afternoon, the transport vehicles quiet as operators processed the day's events. Nora sat near the back, aware of the sidelong glances from other passengers, but keeping her attention focused out the window at the passing California landscape. When they arrived back at the compound, Commander Reyes called out to her before she could head to her quarters. "Corporal Blackwell, a word please." She followed him to his office, a utilitarian space decorated with the memorabilia of a long career. Unit plaques, photographs from various deployments, and a collection of challenge coins that spoke to extensive networking within the special operations community. He gestured for her to sit and close the door. "That was exceptional shooting today," he began without preamble, the kind of exceptional that raises questions. "Thank you, sir." He leaned against his desk, studying her with the same intensity she had noticed at the range. "I've been in this community for 23 years, Corporal. I've worked with some of the best shooters in the world. What I saw today puts you in that category, which makes me very curious about how a Marine corporal, even a scout sniper, developed that level of capability." "Training and practice, sir," she replied evenly. He smiled slightly, without humor. "You're good at deflecting. I respect that. But let me be direct. I have enough clearance and enough connections to dig deeper into your background if I choose to. However, I prefer to hear it from you first. What's your real story?" Nora considered her options. She had been expecting this conversation, or something like it, since her shooting performance began attracting attention. Commander Reyes wasn't someone she could simply stonewall. He had the authority and the connections to get answers whether she cooperated or not. "Sir, my service record accurately reflects my assignments and qualifications. If there are portions that are redacted or classified, that's above my pay grade to discuss." Reyes nodded slowly. "Okay, let's try a different approach. During your third deployment, you were attached to a Joint Special Operations Task Force. That much is in your record. What's not in your record is what you did with that task force." "I provided precision fire support, sir, same as any scout sniper would, at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters," he said quietly. Her expression didn't change, but he saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes. "That's an oddly specific number, sir." "It is," he agreed, "especially when it happens to match the range of a particular shot that saved an entire SEAL platoon in northern Syria 2 years ago. A shot that was attributed to a Marine sniper with a call sign Phantom." The office was very quiet. Outside, Nora could hear the distant sounds of training activities, voices calling cadence, the mechanical rhythm of the base going about its business. Inside this room, everything had shifted. "Sir, I can neither confirm nor deny details of classified operations." "You don't have to," Reyes said. "I was the ground force commander for that operation. I know exactly what happened. I know that we were pinned down by a hostile sniper team that had us completely suppressed. I know that someone made an impossible shot from a position we didn't even know was occupied. And I know that the after-action report listed the assist as coming from a Marine element with no further details provided." He moved around his desk and sat down, his demeanor shifting from interrogator to something more collegial. "I've been trying to track down that sniper for 2 years, Corporal. Not for any official reason. I just wanted to say thank you in person, because that shot and the 3 that followed it saved at least 8 of my men." Nora was silent for a long moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "If such an operation occurred, and if a Marine sniper provided the support you describe, I'm sure that individual would consider it their duty and privilege to support SEAL operations. No thanks would be necessary." Reyes smiled, and this time there was genuine warmth in it, diplomatic to the end. "All right, I'll respect your operational security. But understand something, Corporal. The fact that you're here participating in this assessment tells me that someone in the Marine Corps chain of command is making a statement. They're showing us what's possible, what women are capable of in combat roles. I'm just here to complete my assessment, sir. Of course you are, he said, and you're doing an outstanding job of it. But you should know that your presence here is having an impact beyond just your individual performance. Some of my men are starting to question their assumptions. That's valuable, even if it makes things uncomfortable in the short term. He stood, indicating the conversation was over. Keep doing what you're doing, Corporal, and stay alert. Carlson has been making noise about wanting to test you in other areas. I have a feeling he's going to push for something that puts you in a difficult position. I can handle difficult positions, sir. I believe you can, Reyes replied. Dismissed. Nora left his office and made her way toward her quarters, her mind working through the implications. Commander Reyes knowing about Syria was both a complication and potentially an advantage. He understood what she was capable of, which meant he would be watching more closely. But it also meant he had context for her performance that others lacked. She was halfway to her quarters when Carlson intercepted her, flanked by 2 other SEALs. His expression was hard, his body language aggressive. We need to talk, Marine, he said, moving to block her path. Chief, she replied neutrally. You've been making quite an impression, he continued. Perfect scores, tactical innovations, long-range shooting that makes our best snipers look average. It's almost like you've done this before. Training prepares you for a lot of things, Chief. Training, he repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. See, I've been asking around about you. Called some contacts in the Marine Corps. And, you know what's interesting? Nobody wants to talk about you. Your unit assignments are vague, your deployments have gaps in the timeline, and your actual combat experience is mysteriously absent from any official records. If you have questions about my service record, I suggest you take them up through official channels. Carlson stepped closer, invading her personal space in a clear attempt at intimidation. I think you're hiding something. I think all this performance is smoke and mirrors. And I'm going to prove it. She met his eyes without flinching. I'm not hiding anything, Chief. I'm just doing my job. We'll see about that, he said. Commander Reyes has approved a special exercise for tomorrow. Live-fire coastal insertion scenario. We're going to see how you perform when things get real. When it's not just paper targets and controlled environments. I look forward to it, she replied calmly. He stared at her for another moment, then turned and walked away, his companions following. Nora continued to her quarters, her mind already shifting to what tomorrow might bring. The morning briefing for the coastal insertion exercise was held at 0500 hours in the Operations Center. The entire assessment group assembled, along with several senior officers who had come to observe what was clearly intended to be a major training event. Commander Reyes stood at the front with a detailed map of the coastal training area displayed behind him. Today's scenario simulates a high-value target interdiction along a hostile coastline. He began. We have intelligence indicating that enemy combatants are using this section of beach to move weapons and personnel. Your mission is to insert via small boat, establish overwatch positions, and interdict any hostile activity. This is a live-fire exercise using actual ammunition, so safety protocols are paramount. He clicked to the next slide, showing the opposition force composition. You'll be facing a professional opposition force made up of instructors and experienced operators playing the role of hostile combatants. They'll be using simunition, but you'll be using live rounds for long-range interdiction. Minimum engagement distance is 400 meters to maintain safety separation. Carlson raised his hand. How are the teams being organized, Commander? Form in teams, Reyes replied. Each team will have a designated sector to cover. Team assignments are posted outside. You have 2 hours to prep your gear and conduct briefings. Insertion begins at 0800 hours. Nora checked the roster and found herself assigned to a team with Granger, Hendricks, and a SEAL named Patterson she hadn't worked with before. They gathered in a side room to plan their approach. Granger spread out the map of their assigned sector. We've got about 800 meters of coastline to cover. The terrain gives us several good overwatch positions here, and here. He He pointed to elevated positions that offered clear fields of fire across the beach and approaches. Patterson studied the map with a critical eye. If the opposition is smart, they'll use the natural draws and depressions to mask their movement. We need positions that can cover those dead spaces. Agreed, Granger said. Blackwell, you're our precision shooter. Where do you want to set up? Nora examined the terrain carefully. This position here gives the best overall coverage, but it's the most obvious spot. The opposition will expect someone there. I prefer this location, slightly offset. It's not perfect, but it gives me angles into the dead spaces Patterson mentioned, and it's less predictable. What's the effective range from that position? Hendricks asked. Longest shots would be about 1,200 meters, well within capability for the rifles we'll be using. Granger nodded. All right, that's your position. Hendricks, you'll be her spotter. Patterson and I will take this forward position to provide early warning and handle any close-range threats. Remember, this is live fire. We make absolutely certain of our targets before engaging. They spent the next 90 minutes preparing equipment and conducting rehearsals. Nora selected a precision rifle system chambered in 300 Win Mag, the same platform she had used at the long-range qualification. She zeroed the weapon, checked her ballistic data, and packed extra ammunition. The weight of real combat preparation settled over her like a familiar coat. The boat insertion went smoothly, their craft sliding through the pre-dawn darkness toward the beach. They landed at 0800 hours exactly and moved quickly to their designated positions. Nora and Hendricks climbed to their overwatch location, while Granger and Patterson established their forward observation post. The sun rose slowly over the ocean, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. Nora settled into her shooting position, the rifle an extension of her body, her breathing steady and controlled. Hendricks lay beside her, with a spotting scope, scanning their sector methodically. Wind is light, maybe 4 miles per hour from the west, he reported quietly. Temperature rising, currently 68 degrees. Good conditions for shooting. Copy, Nora replied, her eyes scanning the terrain below. They waited. Patience was fundamental to this kind of work, the ability to remain absolutely still and alert for hours if necessary. Around them, the California coastal vegetation rustled in the morning breeze, and seabirds called overhead. At 09:15, Hendricks spoke softly. Movement, 11 o'clock, approximately 900 meters. Multiple individuals moving along the draw. Nora shifted her scope to the indicated area and saw them. 6 individuals dressed in civilian clothes, but moving with military precision, carrying what appeared to be weapons cases. The opposition force, playing their role convincingly. Confirming 6 personnel, she said. Weapons present. They're in our sector. Granger's voice came over the radio. We see them. They're moving toward the rally point. Wait until they're in optimal position for interdiction. The group below continued forward, using the terrain skillfully to minimize their exposure. But they were moving into a position where Nora would have clear shots from her elevated location. She tracked them patiently, calculating wind, distance, and the timing of her engagement. They're clustered now, Hendricks observed. Range is 820 meters. Wind remains light and consistent from the west. Nora made minute adjustments to her scope, compensating for the exact range and conditions. Her breathing slowed to the rhythm she had practiced 10,000 times. Her finger moved to the trigger, taking up the slack. Then everything changed. Hendricks suddenly tensed beside her, his scope tracking to a different area. Hold fire, he said urgently. We have a new situation. Multiple hostiles, different location, approximately 600 meters. They're setting up what looks like a crew-served weapon. Nora shifted her scope and found the new threat. 4 individuals were rapidly assembling what appeared to be a heavy machine gun, positioning it to cover the same area where Granger and Patterson were located. If they got that weapon operational, it would dominate the entire sector. Granger, we have hostile crew-served weapon team setting up at your 11 o'clock, 600 meters from my position, she reported. They're going to have you pinned in about 30 seconds. Copy, Granger replied, his voice tight. Can you interdict? Stand by, Nora said. She evaluated the situation rapidly. The machine gun team was moving with trained efficiency, each member knowing their role. The weapon was nearly assembled. In moments, they would have it loaded and operational. Once that happened, her team's ability to maneuver would be severely compromised. Engaging crew-served weapon team, she announced calmly. Her first shot took the gunner as he was settling behind the weapon. The sound of the rifle echoed across the coastal terrain, sharp and authoritative. The gunner dropped immediately, marked by the simunition round that signified a kill in this exercise. The assistant gunner tried to take over the position. Nora's second shot caught him before he could fully seat himself behind the weapon. The ammunition bearer reached for the gun. Her third shot eliminated him as well. The team leader realized what was happening and tried to pull the weapon into cover. Nora's fourth shot hit him center mass. In less than 12 seconds, she had neutralized the entire crew-served weapon team with surgical precision. Outstanding shooting, Blackwell, Granger transmitted over the radio, relief evident in his voice. That crew would have had us completely suppressed. The exercise continued with increased intensity. The opposition force, realizing they had a skilled marksman in the area, began moving more cautiously, using every scrap of cover. But Nora had the advantage of position and experience. She continued to engage targets methodically, each shot placed with precision that left Hendricks shaking his head in amazement. You're not missing, he observed after her seventh consecutive hit. At ranges from 6 to 1,200 meters, in varying conditions, you're not missing at all. I miss sometimes, she replied quietly, tracking another target. Just not today. By 1000 hours, she had eliminated 11 opposition fighters, more than any other shooter in the exercise. The other teams were reporting similar success, but none matching her precision or consistency. The opposition force was becoming increasingly frustrated, their movements more cautious and their ability to maneuver severely restricted. Then Hendricks spotted something that made him go very still. Oh no, he said quietly. We got a major problem. He shifted his spotting scope to the far edge of their sector. 3 individuals just went into that abandoned structure at 1,300 meters. They're setting up something big. I think it's a sniper team with dedicated equipment. Nora found the building in her scope, a partially collapsed concrete structure that offered excellent concealment and commanding views of the entire training area. If a hostile sniper team established position there, they would be able to engage multiple friendly positions, including her own. I need better eyes on that position, she said. Hendricks adjusted his scope, using maximum magnification, confirming 3 personnel. They're setting up what looks like a dedicated long-range system. This isn't simunition anymore. They've got actual rifles up there. That made sense. The opposition force would have their own marksmen with real weapons, maintaining the same safety protocols but providing realistic counter-sniper threats. The question was whether those snipers knew where Nora was positioned. Her question was answered moments later when a round impacted the rocks 15 meters to her left. The distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle echoed across the terrain. They've got our position, Hendricks said tersely. That was a ranging shot. Nora's mind was already working through the geometry of the situation. 1,300 meters was extreme range, pushing the envelope of what was possible even with ideal conditions. But those snipers had the advantage of a stable position inside a structure, protected from wind and with solid support for their weapons. She was on open ground with only natural cover. Another round impacted, closer this time. They were walking their shots toward her position, refining their aim with each attempt. Professional work that showed real skill. We need to move, Hendricks urged. They're zeroing in. If we move, we lose our position and our entire sector becomes vulnerable, Nora replied, her voice calm despite the situation. Besides, they'll just track us to wherever we go. So what's the play? I eliminate them first. Hendricks looked at her incredulously. At 1,300 meters? Against entrenched targets inside a building? That's a hell of a shot. It's the shot we need, she said simply. She settled deeper into her position, her body finding absolute stillness despite the knowledge that hostile rounds were seeking her location. The rifle became an extension of her intent, the scope showing her a narrow window in the partially collapsed structure where she had briefly glimpsed movement. The fundamentals were the same as always, just more demanding. Wind at this range was doing complex things, the morning thermals creating currents she couldn't see but had a sense. The bullet drop was substantial, requiring significant holdover, and she would need to thread her shot through a small opening to hit targets she could barely see. Range is 1,310 meters, Hendricks reported, his voice steadier now as he focused on his spotter duties. Wind is 5 miles per hour, switching between west and southwest. I've got one target visible in the window, partially concealed. Second target just moved into view behind him. Nora made her calculations, adjusting her scope and finding her point of aim. She would need to shoot between wind gusts, timing the shot for the moment when conditions were most stable. Her breathing slowed to almost nothing, her heart rate dropping into the zone where each beat was deliberate and controlled. Another hostile round cracked past, close enough that she felt the pressure wave. They were getting very close now. Her next decision would determine whether she could maintain her position or would be forced to relocate under fire. She found the moment between heartbeats, between breaths, between thoughts. The trigger broke cleanly and the rifle barked. Through her scope, she saw her round impact exactly where she intended, hitting the first sniper in the shoulder. He dropped out of sight immediately. Target 1 is down, Hendricks confirmed. Target 2 is repositioning. The second sniper was smart, moving to a different window to complicate her targeting solution. But movement created opportunity. She tracked him as he shifted, waited for him to settle into his new position, and sent another round downrange. This one took him in the upper chest, the paint round marking a clean kill. Target 2 eliminated, Hendricks reported, his voice carrying a note of awe. He paused, searching for words. That was world-class shooting, Corporal. Before Nora could respond, a third figure appeared in yet another window, this one with a rifle already oriented toward her position. The third sniper fired immediately, his round impacting so close that dirt and rock fragments peppered her face. She didn't flinch, didn't rush. Her training and experience overrode any instinct to panic. She acquired the target, made a fractional adjustment for his different position, and fired. The round flew true across 1,300 meters of California morning air and found its mark. The third sniper went down. All targets eliminated, Hendricks said quietly. 3 for 3 at 1,300-plus meters against targets in hardened positions who were actively engaging us. I don't even know what to say about that. Granger's voice came over the radio, urgent and confused. Blackwell, what's happening at your position? We're hearing a lot of fire. Neutralized hostile sniper team, Commander, Nora replied calmly. Sector is secure. There was a pause. Then Reyes's voice came over the command net, overriding the team frequencies. All elements, cease exercise. I say again, cease exercise. All personnel return to the operations center for immediate debrief. The sudden end to the exercise created a strange stillness. Nora saved her weapon and began breaking down her position while Hendricks continued to stare at her with an expression that mixed respect, confusion, and something approaching disbelief. Who are you really? He asked quietly as they prepared to move out. She met his eyes for a moment, then looked away toward the ocean. Just a Marine doing my job, petty officer. But they both knew that answer was no longer sufficient. What she had just demonstrated went far beyond standard military capability. And when they returned to the operations center, there would be questions that could no longer be deflected or avoided. The operations center was packed when Nora arrived, every seat filled and operators lining the walls. Commander Reyes stood at the front with several senior officers she didn't recognize, their uniforms displaying ranks from lieutenant commander to captain. The atmosphere was charged with tension and curiosity. Reyes waited until everyone had assembled, then gestured for quiet. What we just witnessed during the coastal exercise was extraordinary. Corporal Blackwell engaged and eliminated 14 opposition force members over the course of 2 hours, including a 3-person sniper team at over 1,300 meters while under direct fire. His voice was level but carried an edge of intensity. This level of performance demands explanation. Carlson stood up from where he had been sitting, his face flushed. With all due respect, Commander, I think we need to question whether these results are legitimate. The scenarios seem designed to showcase one individual rather than evaluate the entire assessment group. Reyes's eyes went cold. Chief Petty Officer Carlson, are you suggesting the exercise was rigged? I'm suggesting we don't know the full story here, Carlson shot back. This Marine shows up with a thin service record, demonstrates capabilities that exceed even our most experienced operators, and we're just supposed to accept it without question? The room went very quiet. Granger stood up, his voice calm but firm. Chief, I was in the field with Corporal Blackwell. I can personally attest that every engagement was legitimate and followed proper protocols. What you're questioning is her competence, and I'm telling you that competence is real. Carlson turned to face Granger. Then, maybe it's time we got some answers about where that competence came from. Who is she really? Reyes raised his hand, stopping the argument before it could escalate further. Actually, Chief Carlson raises a valid point. Not about the legitimacy of today's performance, which was beyond reproach, but about the question of Corporal Blackwell's background. He turned to face Nora directly. Corporal, I think it's time we clear the air. With your permission, I'd like to share some information about your service history. Nora stood at attention, her face impassive. That's your prerogative, Commander. Reyes nodded and picked up a folder from the table beside him. Corporal Nora Blackwell has been a Marine Scout sniper for 6 years. She has 3 combat deployments, 2 to Helmand Province and 1 to northern Syria. What's not in her standard service record are the details of her 3rd deployment. He paused, looking around the room. During that deployment, she was attached to a Joint Special Operations Task Force conducting high-value target interdiction missions. The room was absolutely silent now, every eye fixed on Reyes. He continued, his voice taking on a different quality. 2 years ago, a SEAL platoon was conducting a direct action mission in northern Syria. They were ambushed by a hostile sniper team that had them completely pinned down. 8 men were wounded, 3 critically. The platoon was in danger of being overrun. He looked directly at Nora, a Marine sniper, operating from a position over 3,000 meters away, eliminated the hostile sniper team with 4 shots in under 90 seconds. Those shots saved that entire platoon. Granger's eyes widened with recognition. The Syria operation. That was you? The platoon commander for that mission, Reyes said quietly, was me. I've been trying to identify that sniper for 2 years. The after-action reports listed her only by her operational call sign. He paused for effect. Phantom. The word landed like a thunderclap. Several of the SEALs in the room straightened, recognition dawning on their faces. Even Carlson had gone pale, the implications washing over him. Phantom, Richardson repeated, his voice hushed. The legend is real? The legend is standing right here, Reyes confirmed. Corporal Blackwell has 87 confirmed kills across her 3 deployments. Her longest confirmed kill is 3,200 meters. She has been awarded the Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor Device, and the Navy Cross for actions in support of SEAL operations. All of this was kept classified to protect ongoing operations and her ability to deploy again without being targeted by hostile intelligence. Hendricks stood up slowly. The Navy Cross? For a Marine supporting SEAL operations? Reyes nodded. The award was approved, but kept classified. Very few people outside the special operations community knew about it. He turned back to Nora. Corporal, would you like to add anything? Nora was quiet for a moment, then spoke, her voice steady. I did my job, same as every other operator in theater. The men I supported needed help, and I was in a position to provide it. There's no legend, just training and execution. Carlson was standing motionless, his earlier aggression completely deflated. He looked like a man who had just realized he had been challenging someone far beyond his understanding. Commander, he started, then stopped, unable to find words. You owe Corporal Blackwell an apology, Chief, Reyes said firmly. You've questioned her integrity, her capabilities, and her right to be here. I think the record speaks for itself. Carlson crossed the room to where Nora stood. His face was a mixture of shame and grudging respect. Corporal, I was wrong. About everything. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment, and I treated you disrespectfully. That was unprofessional and unacceptable. I apologize. Nora met his eyes steadily. Apology accepted, Chief. We all have assumptions. The key is being willing to change them when we're shown new information. Reyes cleared his throat. Corporal Blackwell's presence here was intentional. The Marine Corps and Naval Special Warfare Command wanted to demonstrate that women can not only meet the standards for special operations, they can exceed them. This assessment was as much about changing perceptions as it was about individual evaluation. He looked around the room. Every one of you has now worked alongside a female operator who performs at the highest level. When the integration of women into SEAL teams becomes official, I expect you to remember these past 2 weeks. I expect you to evaluate candidates based on their capabilities, not your preconceptions. The room erupted in spontaneous applause. Operators who had been skeptical days before were now standing, acknowledging what Nora had accomplished. Even Carlson joined in, his expression showing genuine respect earned through demonstrated excellence. Granger approached her after the briefing ended. That explains a lot, he said with a slight smile. The tactics, the shooting, the way you carry yourself. You've been operating at the highest level for years. Just doing the mission, Lieutenant. Well, for what it's worth, it's been an honor to work with you. And I think you've changed some mind around here. That matters more than you might realize. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you've had a similar situation where someone proved all the doubters wrong. That evening, Nora sat on her bunk, finally alone with her thoughts. The secret was out. The pressure of maintaining her cover lifted. She had proven what she came to prove, changed perceptions she was sent to change. Tomorrow she would return to Camp Pendleton and whatever assignment came next. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, not for the recognition or the respect, though those were gratifying, but for the knowledge that she had opened a door for others who would follow. Women who wouldn't have to hide their capabilities or downplay their achievements. Women who could serve at the highest levels based solely on their merit. The legend of Phantom would continue, she knew. But now it had a face, a name, and a purpose beyond individual achievement. It had become proof that excellence knows no gender, only dedication and skill. And that, she thought as she finally closed her eyes, was worth every uncomfortable moment of the past 2 weeks.